Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of the first book of Kings, that's Melachim Aleph, chapter 18, Perek Yud Ches. We are at verse 19 in that chapter, and we have just read of the encounter between Eliyahu and Ahab, that's Elijah the prophet and Ahab the king of Israel. And they had just engaged in a verbal argument over who was responsible for bringing the people of the northern kingdom, the people of Israel, to a state of despair, to a state of achar, a state of ikur, a state where they were troubled. And Ahab pointed his finger at Eliyahu, and Eliyahu turned back to Ahab and said, "No, it was you, because you were the one who decided to forsake God and to bring the people and lead them to idol worship of Baal." Now, at this point, Eliyahu, remember in the beginning of this chapter, he was told by God, go back to Ahab and I will bring rain, right? In other words, you, Eliyahu, decided to bring punishment to the people in order to bring them back to God. It didn't work. It's not going to work. I want you to go back. And Eliyahu encountered another prophet who did stay with Ahab. That was the prophet Ovadiyahu. And Ovadiyahu tried to teach Eliyahu that the proper path is not to bring punishment upon people. That's not going to work, to make people suffer. But the proper path is to stay with the program, to stay with the king and influence from the inside, which is what he was hinting Eliyahu should have done, instead of go off and disappear into the wilderness, as in Ovadiyahu's words, wherever the Spirit of God might take you, to some forsaken place. What are you going to help there? I stayed here. I saved prophets of God, while you were out in the wilderness doing whatever it was that you were doing. But however, without fully getting the message, Eliyahu now is thinking, now what I need to do is prove. Now I'm here with Ahab. I have to prove to Ahab, I have to prove to the people that God is the true God and Baal is not true. And on his own, we remember this is really important, because just like Eliyahu on his own declared the hunger, Eliyahu on his own is also asking for the following confrontation to occur. We have no mention that God told him to do this. So v'ata, and now what I want is shalach kivot elai. I want you to gather to me et kol Yisrael, all of the people of Israel, el hara Carmel, to the mountain of Carmel. V'et nevi'ei haBaal, and I want you to bring all the prophets of Baal too, arba me'ot v'chamishim, the 450 prophets, u'nevi'ei ha'asherah, and the prophets of the Asherah, that was Baal's consort. Remember, we discussed this in earlier podcasts, that Baal was the husband, the male god of rain and fertility, and the Asherah was the female consort, the female version of it. And there was Arba Meot, 400 of them, Ochlei Shulchan Izebel, who ate at the table of Izebel, of Jezebel. And she, of course, as we see here and as we'll see later, was the primary instigator of this religious abandonment of God and this religious devotion to the cult of Asherah and Baal. So Ahab listened to Eliyahu in this challenge. Vayishlach Ahab b'chol b'nei Yisrael. Remember, Eliyahu at this point hadn't even told Ahab what he was doing. So here he has the king's ear. The king is listening to him. So the king goes ahead and says, okay, all the people of Israel, vayikbotz et hanvi'im el har Carmel, and he brings all the prophets, the Baal prophets, to Har Carmel, to the mountain of Carmel. Vayigash Eliyahu el kol ha'am. And Eliyahu appears to the entire nation, stands up in front of them, and gives the following speech. Vayomer, and he says, Ad mosai atem poschim al shtei ha'seipim. How long will it be that you're going to be jumping or hopping between the two branches? Im Adonai Elohim luchu acharav. If God is the true God, then follow him. V'im Baal, and if it's Baal luchu acharav, then go follow after him. V'lo anhu ha'amos odavar, and the people of the nation didn't answer. It's interesting that they didn't answer, because in their mind, they didn't understand that there was a problem. They think, why can't we worship him and him? They just didn't get it. But Eliyahu is telling them, no, this is poseach al shtei seipim. One is mutually exclusive of the other. Monotheism does not accept the possibility of having other gods to worship when you decide to worship other ones. So Vayomer Eliyahu says to the nation, and this is a very curious statement here, which he's going to make now and he's going to make later again. And eventually we're going to find in this statement a flaw in Eliyahu here, because he's fighting this battle by himself. Ovadiyahu, who we know is also a prophet of God, we know, and who has hidden 100 prophets of God, and we're going to see later there are many prophets of God that are in the court of Ahab, trying to influence him in the right way. We'll see them over the next few chapters repeatedly. However, he says over here a statement, Ani notarti navi l'Adonai levadi. I am left alone as a prophet to God. Eliyahu saw himself as the only crusader. Now, Eliyahu obviously knew that Obadiah and the other prophets were there, but he sees this crusade, this fight, that he's the only one fighting the fight. He's the only one. It's a very curious statement, because he sees the others as capitulating to Ahab, whereas God wanted him to learn that no, right? They're not capitulating. They're actually accomplishing something. Ahab is willing to listen. You need to stay with him, and you need to push the people in the right direction. Or even if he's not willing to listen, that's still the proper path. That's the proper way to go. But nonetheless, Eliyahu makes this statement. I'm the only one. And here we see 450 prophets of the Baal. For whatever reason, he's ignoring the prophets of Asherah, which were another 400. Vayitnu lanu, let it be given to us, shnayim parim, two oxen. Vayivcharu lahem apara echad, and they chose for them one ox. Vayinatchu, and they cut it up, and let them cut it up. That's what they should do. Vayasimu ala eitzim, and they should place it on a pile of wood. Ve'esh lo yasimu, but don't bring fire to it. V'ani aseh sapar echad, and I will go and do another cow or ox or whatever. V'nasati ala eitzim, and I'll put it on the wood. Ve'esh lo asim, and I will also not put fire on it. Ukrasem b'shem Elohechem, and you can go out and call in the name of your God. V'ani ekra b'shem Adonai, and I will call in the name of God. V'yoha Elohim asher yanevo eish, the God who brings fire who brings fire down and answers the prayers with fire. Hu Elohim, that will be the real God. So I'm going to test. I'll show you who the real one is. Vayan kol ha'am vayomru tov hadavar, and the nation answered. The people answered and said, "Yes, this is a good test. Let's do it." And with this, we will do it. We will believe in we worship whichever God does this special trick. Now, the interesting thing here is, if you think about this, often people say, well, if really God, let him strike that person with lightning, or let him just win the lottery today, or show me a sign. We always do this, but this is not the way God works. But Eliyahu is here asking God and going to push God into a corner, so to speak, and so that Eliyahu is trying to show that let me have this sign, right? In the end, it's going to fail. It's going to be an epic failure, and it's going to lead to to Eliyahu losing his position as the primary prophet. He's going to have to hand over the baton because he's not getting the message. But here, God is kind of playing along with him for this time, and he's allowing this to go on. And Eliyahu is going to go ahead and prove to the people that there's a God, because he's going to ask for this tremendous sign. So they took the bull that was given to them by Asu, and they prepared it. Prepared it meaning they cut it. And they called out in the name of the God with a small g, the Baal, mehaboker v'ad hatzoraim, from the morning of that day until the afternoon. Lamar calling Habal anenu, Baal, answer us. Ve'en kol ve'en oneh, there is no voice from heaven answering. There's no one answering. Vayafaschu al hamizbeach asher asah, and they jumped and danced around the altar that they had made. Vayivat tzorayim, it came in the noontime, like Vayihatel bohem Eliyahu, and Eliyahu started to mock them and make fun of them. Vayomer kiru v'kol gadol, call out maybe in a louder voice, ki Elohim hu, because he's a God. Maybe he's busy. Maybe kisiach, he's busy having a meeting. V'chi siglo, maybe he is stuck somewhere. V'chi derechlo, maybe he's on some kind of a trip. Ulay yashen, maybe he's asleep. V'yikatz, and if you call out loud, you'll wake him up. Eliyahu is mocking the idea, the concept of a God, a corporeal God here. Vayikru v'kol gadol, so they called out louder. Vayisgodedu k'mishpatam, and they cut themselves, which is the way they would worship the God. Bacharavos, with swords, machim and spears, ad shefachtam aleim, until they were gushing with blood. Vayi kavorat tzorayim, and when the noon passed, or it passed into the afternoon, vayisnabu ad la'alos hamincha, and they were prophesying, and this is like I see it translated sometimes as raving, in some kind of a trance and a dance with the cutting and the singing and the dancing, ad la'alos hamincha, until it came time in the early afternoon to bring the karban mincha, the mincha sacrifice, the grain sacrifice, ve'in kol ve'in onet ve'in kashev, and that's there was no one answering. There was no fire coming down. The Baal God did not listen. So when the people are frustrated, nothing's happening, Eliyahu said to everyone, come over to me, and they all came over to him. And he repaired the damage that had been done to the altar of God. It would seem that there was some sort of an altar that was here before that had been destroyed, and he repaired it. There's all kinds of explanations as to where this came from. There's tradition that it was built by Saul in earlier times. Whatever it was, there was a destroyed altar that had originally been built for God there. Vayikach Eliyahu shnei mesrei avonim, and Eliyahu took 12 stones, k'mispar shiftei bnei Yaakov, right, which is the number of the 12 tribes of Yaakov, the 12 tribes that have been split. They have divided into two kingdoms, and one of the main reasons for this split was because the northern kingdom wanted to go on their own path, on their own spiritual path, and abandon God and leave him. And Eliyahu is trying to show and demonstrate to them that this belief in Baal has ruined the entire unity of the people of Israel. If we would go back to God, we will all be able to come back together again, both the northern and the southern kingdoms. Because God, Yaakov, Jacob, our forefather of everyone, he had been told that your name shall be Yisrael. We are the nation of Yisrael. We should be all together. We should all be one tribe. And by returning to God, we can bring about that unity again. Adonai, and with the stones he built into them an altar to God in the name of God. Vayas to Allah, and he built around it like a small in the ground, like a moat or a trench dug around it. Kivesa sayim zera, enough for a space of 2 sa'as of seed. It's a large thing, around the altar. Vayaroch et ha'etzim, and then he set up the wood. Vayenetach et hapar, and he cut up the bull. Vayasem al ha'etzim, and he put the bull, ox, whatever, onto the wood. Vayomer mil'u arba'a chadim mayim, and he said, go fill up 4 vessels of water, vayitzku al ha'olav yal ha'etzim, and pour it over the offering and pour it over the wood, presumably to make the miracle of the fire even more spectacular by soaking the wood with water. Vayomer shenu vayeshnu, keep on doing it. Vayomer shaleshu vayeshaleshu, they did it over 3 times. Vayelchu hamayim saviv lamizbeach, and the water poured and eventually it overflowed around the altar, v'gametat Allah milei mayim, so that this trench that was dug was now full of water. Vayibalot hamincha, it was at around that time of day. Vayigash Eliyahu hanavi, and Eliyahu the prophet approached Vayomar, and he said, Adonai Elohei Avraham v'Yitzchak v'Yisrael, God, the Lord of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, Hayom Yivadah, today it shall be known, Ki ato Elohim b'Yisrael, that you are God in Israel, V'ani Abdecha, and I am your servant. Uvidvarcha asisi es kol hadorim ha'ela, and it was because of your word that I have done all of these things, which is not really true. At least we never saw. However, Eliyahu is assuming that he has God's backing to do this, thinking that if I do this, it's all going to work. The people will return to God and everything will be okay. And then he says, Aneni Adonai Aneni, answer me, God, answer me. Those words, that phrase is a paraphrase, is the same phrase where they said before a few verses ago when they were praying to the Baal, answer us, Baal. But he says this to God. And we also use these words in various prayers we use in the liturgy. And then if you answer me, this nation shall know ki ato Adonai Elohim, that you are the Lord God. And this last four words are interesting. Ve'ato hasibosa et libam achoranis. Now the literal translation of these words are that you are the one who turned their heart backward, away. It's almost like he's arguing with God. However, it's understood to be by most of the traditional commentaries that he means to say this, and you, if you go ahead and perform this miracle, then you will be, even though it's written in past tense, the one who turns their heart around, in other words, towards you. But the language is very interesting because the language tends to give the feeling that Eliyahu is, and on some level, accusing God of just show yourself. This is the kind of thing lots of times people say when you discuss with somebody about the existence of God. Well, if you would just show yourself, then everyone would know. And here, God listens. Vatipol, and interesting, what we're going to find as we learn through this chapter in today's thing and in future ones, we're going to find that by listening to him, what God is actually doing is proving Eliyahu wrong, right? He's proving Eliyahu wrong, that this is not the way to prove or bring people closer to God. Tricks and miracles and signs and so on is not what's going to work. But right now, the way he's going to teach that lesson is by making the following thing happen. So a fire came down from God, and it consumed the offering, and the wood, and it scorched the stones, and the dirt. It even dried up the water that was in the moat, or in the ditch. And the people saw this incredible spectacle, and they fell on their faces, and they said, Adonai hu Elohim, Adonai hu Elohim, God is the true God. Vayomer Eliyahu lahem. And Eliyahu said to the people, Tifsu, and like seizing the moment, Tifsu, grab at Nevi'e HaBaal, the prophets of the Baal, Ishal yimalet mehem, do not let any of them escape. Vayitpesum, and they grasped them. Vayeridem Eliyahu al Nachal Kishon, Eliyahu brought them down to the stream of Kishon, Vayishchatem Sham, and he slaughtered them there. Was this what he was supposed to do? Why didn't he ask that the Nevi'e HaBaal maybe repent and come back to God? But he seized the moment, and in his vengeance, his zeal for God, this is what Eliyahu did. Vayomer Eliyahu la'achav, and then Eliyahu went, and he said to Achav, to the king, Alei achol u'shusei, go and celebrate, go and eat and drink, ki kol hamon hagashem, because there is the sound of rain coming. In other words, now you can celebrate, because now the people have returned to God, and the whole reason why the people didn't have rain was because they weren't with God, so now they're going to come back. And now the rain is going to come. And God had promised me. Now remember, in Eliyahu's mind, he's doing what God wants, bringing the people back to God and taking vengeance against the prophets of Baal. This was all what Eliyahu assumes is what's supposed to happen. So, Achav, go celebrate. Vayala Achav le'achol v'lishtos. And Achav, interestingly, goes ahead and listens. He does exactly as he was told. Ve'eliyahu ala al Rosh Carmel. And then Eliyahu goes to the top of the Carmel mountain, Vayighar Arza, and he crouches or curls up on the ground, Vayasem Panav Ben Birkov, and he puts his face between his knees because there isn't rain yet. What's going on? God, you promised me if I would come back to Achav, rain would happen. And I said the sound of rain is coming, but it's not there. And God is clearly dragging this out because to teach Eliyahu a lesson. This is not that simple. Vayomer el Na'aro, he said to his son, Aleina habeit derech yam, go up to a tall place so that you can look towards the sea. Vayal vayabeit, he went up and he looked out towards the sea. Vayomer ein mu'uma, I don't see anything. In other words, because the rain clouds would be coming from that direction. I still don't see any rain clouds. Vayomer shuv sheva pamim. This happened 7 times. Go look again. Go look again. While he's lying there praying, Vayihi b'shvius, and finally on the 7th time, Vayomer hine of kitana Kechaf ish, I see in the distance a small cloud that's about the size, or at least it looks like the size as a person's hand, Ola miyam, that is coming up from the sea. Vayomer, and he says, Alei amor al Achav esor voreid v'lo yatzorcha geshem. Now you go up to Achav and say, you can hitch up your chariot and get ready to go down the mountain. In other words, heading back towards your palace, because you need to get going before the rain ruins it for you. Vayhi adko v'adko, and then, meanwhile, this continued. Vashamayim miskadru avim v'ruach, and the sky started filling with dark clouds and wind. Vayigeshem gadol, and a tremendous rain came down. Vayirkav Achav vayelech Yisraela, and Achav rode on his in his chariot, and he went towards Yisrael, and to leave, to escape the rain. V'yad Adonai Yisrael Eliyahu, and the hand of God had come to Eliyahu because God had listened. Vayishanes masnav, so he tied up his clothing because now he's running in the rain. Vayaretz lifnei Achav, and he ran in front of the chariot of the king ad boacha Yisrael. A tremendous honor to Achav. So here Eliyahu is thinking, I've brought the people back to God. Achav has now seen this. I've won. I've shown the people who the true God is. I've gotten rid of the Nevi'ei Habal. Now everything is good. Now I have done my job. That's why God has brought the rain. But Eliyahu is missing something tremendous. And very, very quickly he's going to learn his lesson. That this trick, this miracle, didn't work. But we don't know that yet. Right now, everything seems great. Everything seems awesome. The people have returned to God. The king has returned to God. Eliyahu has returned to the house of Achav. However, Eliyahu's stunt is not going to last very long at all. And that we will study together when we read and we learn chapter 19. Thank you so much for studying together with me. Looking forward to studying chapter 19 and, of course, the rest of this book together. Have a wonderful day.